Hello everyone, I'm Ben, this is Books with Benghis Khan, and today I have for you my top 10 favorite fantasy and science fiction series of all time. This is the first one of these I've done for the channel, so it'll be my snapshot for early 2023. It'll be interesting for me if this ends up changing at all over the next couple years. These are just my personal favorites, and ranked by the very scientific, gripped to the page-o-meter, and I'm going by ones that were just the most consistently engaging for me from start to finish, that also brought out real genuine emotion and that I could feel physically as I was reading or maybe afterward and left a real mark with me. So definitely my subjective takes, not the most profound, most sophisticated books ever written, just my own personal top 10 at the moment. So here we go. At number 10 is the original Red Rising trilogy, just the first three books, which are all I've read so far. And these just captivated me over a very short period of time because I could not put them down. So I read these three over the course of, I think, just 2 weeks. They were so engaging. I liked it from book one. I just loved that whole very high stakes training game. And then as it expanded into a bit more of a sci-fantasy epic, just absolutely gripped me. And also, this is interesting because I picked this one up and just read the first chapter and I DNF'd it, and I really don't like the very beginning section of book one. And so the second time I tried it, I just kind of powered through that, and once we got out into the real plot and place and setting where the rest of the series takes place, it just completely turned around and I loved it. I am a little fearful if this is going to still be as precious to me after I continue on. I know people say it gets darker, but the first three books are pretty dark and very high stakes. So I'm a little scared of where it's going, but these first three, very precious to me. Just the plot twists and turns, and being a one single POV, first person kind of story. If you really like that character and like inhabiting their mind and experience, then it's usually going to be a good time. And I just loved being with Darrow and exploring his different relationships that he has with many different people. So I was utterly gripped the entire time. So Red Rising at number 10. For the next one, we are staying with sci-fi, and it is the most recent series on my list. That is The Expanse. So I just read all 10 of these, the 9 novels, the short stories that I interspersed throughout, and just so consistently engaging and immersive. I just loved the extremely finely detailed near future world building where I could really picture this being a realistic way of living out in space or going on spaceships and colonizing different planets and moons in our solar system. It all felt extremely believable in terms of the physics being ever present. And even when it got a little high concept sci-fi and speculative, I was on board for that. I loved the mixture of those two things going on in this series. And at the heart of the series is a found family. I got very attached to a lot of the characters, and it became a very sentimental, emotional journey by the end. And just the last 5 books were so strong. Loved the ending trilogy. I loved the first couple books. It starts strong, ends strong. Maybe got a little less engaging in books 3 and 4 for me, but consistently just really liked all of these books. And it's exactly what I want from sci-fi these days. At number 8, we are sticking with sci-fi, and it is the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu. And you might know this as the Three Body Problem trilogy. That's the first book. This is the series that reinvigorated my reading habit. So I read this in 2017, and at that point, over the few years prior, my reading had kind of just really kind of tailed off. I was reading just a few books a year. They weren't really engaging me. And it was picking up this one on a whim that got me all excited again. I could not put these down. I ended up going on a trip where I just brought book 2, The Dark Forest. I thought that would be sufficient, but I quickly got through The Dark Forest, even though that's a big one, and I needed to grab the third book, Death's End, on Kindle and just read it on my phone every spare second on this trip I was on. And I loved it. I think I did a reread of it within a year of finishing. I loved it so much. This is very different than everything else on this list because it's definitely less of a focus on characters that you would really get invested in, but I still did. I still got invested in these characters and their journeys, but it's much more in service of this epic plot and this story of first contact and how that might go in the future and over many, many years, and seeing the Earth's kind of trajectory over many, many generations was so interesting. You get lots of thought-provoking ideas. I'm still thinking about them. And just the suspense and the payoff of some of these plot points and situations where you don't know how they're going to turn out. Some really epic things are going on all the time. Just could not love this hard sci-fi series more. So yeah, that is the Three Body Problem trilogy. At number 7, it's a bit of an outlier, also a recent one, is the Warlord Chronicles trilogy by Bernard Cornwell. And this is a King Arthur retelling and just swept me up and took me away to a different time and place for almost a whole month. I love just binging series, a lot of time, and being so immersed in one story and setting. And this was one that I was just not familiar with. The year 500 AD Britain. I've not really ever seen or read any King Arthur retellings before, so I'm coming to this completely fresh. It felt kind of very similar to Fantasy Secondary World for me, since it's so foreign. But it's so interesting. The Saxons are invading. There's a culture clash going on in Britain between the rise of Christianity and the kind of the older Druidic pagan Britain that had the culture that kind of been stamped out by the Romans. And then within all of it is this epic political plot, and with lots of personal stakes too, with King Arthur being this warlord who's trying to unite a bunch of different factions in Britain to defend against the Saxon invasion, and Derfel, the narrator who's telling this story retrospectively, just there to witness it all and to play a big role. I just got so attached to Derfel and all of the different relationships going on, some absolutely loathsome characters that made your blood boil, really suspenseful plotting, some things that go down in the end of Book 2, Enemy of God, that just were mind-blowing. I don't think I've ever been as tense reading as I was in the last section of Enemy of God. Fantastic ending with Excalibur. Yeah, just got me into historical fiction, and now I want to try lots more historical fiction as well, because it did a lot of the same things that some of the great fantasy epics have done for me. At number 6 is The First Law World by Joe Abercrombie, and this is folding in 2 different trilogies that I loved, a bunch of standalone novels, a book of short stories, so 10 big books, and pretty much 9 out of 10 of those were big hits with me, so I just ate up that first trilogy. The Heroes is one of my single favorite books, I think, of all time. Liked Red Country, the short stories were a hit with me, and the Age of Madness trilogy was so solid. I binged the first 8 First Law books that were out, and then hit the last 2 Age of Madness ones as they came out as new releases, and it was so easy to get back immersed in the story, and just so excited to read those last 2, and he ended it all so strongly, and I do hope we get more in this world, because I need more Stephen Pacey narrated material. This is the one on this list where I did not read a single word of it in print. I actually did it fully in audio with Stephen Pacey, and that's why I can't detach my experience of the text from Pacey's performance, which I just loved to death. So just, and this is supposed to be Grimdark by Lord Grimdark, but maybe I didn't get the memo, because I deeply cared about most of our POV characters and was rooting for them, even if maybe we weren't supposed to. But, you know, there were some that I think were meant to loathe who I really did. But yeah, I was caring about these characters' journeys, action that was extremely gritty and suspenseful, well plotted, and I laughed more than I ever have with any other series. So much wit and cleverness, laugh out loud moments, and very dark humor that just worked with Pacey's performance. So yeah, could not get enough First Law. All right, into the top 5 now, where it was really hard for me to rank these and figure out the placements. So they're all very close to my heart. And so at 5, we have an incomplete series that's still going, which is the Sun Eater Saga by Christopher Rocchio. This is sci-fantasy that'll get you emotionally invested and just take you on a wild journey that is high stakes and full of thought-provoking ideas. And Rocchio is an old soul. He's younger than me, but he's just dropping words of wisdom all over the place. I feel like I'm becoming wiser as I read these, and it just, the first person narration by Hadrian just speaks to my soul a lot of the time. And whether it's the faster paced action sequences that are utterly gripping and unpredictable, or the slower sections where there's some politicking or maybe just some relaxation going on, no matter what type of pacing we get in the books, I was gripped. I wanted more, and we're gonna get more because we have 2 more novels, some more short stories, novellas maybe. Bring on more Sun Eater, and we'll see as this series comes to a close over the next few years if this can rise up further on my list. I hope it ends really strongly. And another one where I love the audio narration. Samuel Rowkin is so immersive as Hadrian and voicing the other characters as well. So I did a lot of this one immersively. I enjoyed reading the prose and hearing Rowkin's narration at the same time. Just a fantastic experience. A lot of people say it gets really great in book 2, but for me, I love book 1, which is definitely slower paced. And so, when you love the book of a series, the other people that are fans, say it's okay. That series is really for you. And so, yeah, Sun Eater, couldn't love it more. At number 4, we have one that I want to put on more people's radar. That is Shadows of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So Tchaikovsky is much more well known for his sci-fi books, but he started his publishing career with this 10-book epic fantasy series that is so consistently high quality from start to finish. It's accessibly written, fast-paced, with lots of high-stakes gritty action, and so much creative world building, as there's this almost World War II-like situation. It's almost like we're in the in-between between World War I and World War II, where there's a rising power that a lot of the different city-states on the map are not taking too seriously, and can this scrappy band of protagonists convince enough allies to band together with them to fight against the rising tide of this empire? There's different types of human races that have each bonded with a different insect or arachnid, and it kind of gives these people certain powers, like the fly kindin can fly really well, the spider kindin are really great with emotional manipulation and can be very sneaky, the mantis kindin are great warriors. So there's lots of creative world building, and as you go through the series, you just get exposed to more places on the map, more different kindin, and more abilities. It all expands in a really great way. It starts with a 4-book arc that does reach a satisfying conclusion that is so fast-paced and breakneck and tense. But then when you reach the end of that 4-book arc, the next 3 books kind of slow down a bit. It does a lot of deeper character building that really enriches the series and got me a lot more attached to the characters, and then sets you up for a breakneck final trilogy. This has incredible action and battle scenes. There's a lot of military aspects to the series, almost steampunk, new technology coming around. Has a lot to offer. I think many more people would love this than have found it so far. So that is one of my favorites that I read within the last couple years. Number 3, I have to go with The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. Just a spectacular quartet of books. I don't know exactly how to treat the entire Banished Lands saga. I binged all 7, including the sequel series of Blood and Bone, and maybe that's keeping it further down my list because there's a time skip of about 100 years between the 2 series, and I really should have given it more time because the first 4 was just so engaging and just gripped me emotionally in a way that few other books and series have. Cared from book 1, where a lot of people are like, it takes some time to get going. No, I was in it from the beginning of book 1. The scrappy band of protagonists who have to band together to fight this rising tide of evil. You might be seeing a theme here for some of my favorites. And just the found family, the brotherhood at the heart of this, the heart, and the enemies, the antagonists that you get POVs of that make your blood boil. Just Gwyn is so good at this, just like Bernard Cornwell. And just the action too, the military fighting, the sword fighting, whether it's a large-scale battle or small-scale fighting, just so tense and gripping, like you're there with the GoPro camera in the shield wall. It was just so immersive. The plotting just moved at a breakneck pace, and some characters that are just unforgettable for me, and I can't wait to reread this one periodically over the years. Those first 4 books, perfect. Just perfection. And yeah, I still have John Gwynn's most recent trilogy that I want to get to at some point. So Gwynn, definitely one of my favorite fantasy authors. Yeah, I don't have a single bad thing, negative critique about Faithful and the Fallen. On to number 2. This would be The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. So this is one of the earliest fantasy series I read, and it just completely enraptured me from the get-go. Book 1, lots of people say, oh, wait until book 5, wait until changes, book 12. No, for me, I was in it from book 1. This is another that I did mostly on audio. I did the first few books in print, and then I started up listening to James Marsters and got so immersed with his narration. And he took me on a roller coaster ride up through Skin Game at the time. And then waiting for those last couple books to get released, and then they were so intense. I actually did a whole Dresden reread this past year and loved it pretty much just as much the second time around. So it just captures me emotionally. I'm invested in Harry, this first-person POV, and all of his various relationships and sticky situations he gets in, and how he gets out with a little help from his friends. And yeah, just so well plotted in terms of each individual book. They're suspenseful, they provide high-stakes emotional moments and action a lot of the time, and just the way the series builds gradually into something so epic, when it starts a little bit smaller scale, just a fantastic ride so far, and I am just in such suspense waiting for each book now as it's going to be released. And this series is going to take a while to come to an end, so maybe it'll be a lifelong journey for me, and hopefully we get to that epic ending that Butcher is planning. But yeah, I love the Dresden Files. I understand a lot of the critiques of it, but for me, it's just about perfection. Before I get to my number 1 fantasy series, I want to mention a few honorable mentions. So a few that would have been on this top 10 had I done this a couple years ago. And so a couple of series that were some of the first that I read and that were in my top 10 for a long time, but now have been pushed out by some of the others. So that would include Temeraire, which is a 9-book series by Naomi Novik. It's the Napoleonic War, but with dragons. I just got swept up in this. And yes, some of the books are a little weaker than others, but just a compelling ride where you get lots of gritty, tense military action, but dragons have been added in that kind of serve as this kind of a aerial navy, and they're very vulnerable. They're not overpowered, but they do add this very interesting strategic dimension to the war, and you get lots of great friendships of various kinds throughout the series. That's the primary type of relationship that's explored, and just a lot of heart in that series. Another one that I loved reading it early on was the Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman. Just so unpredictable. These read more like literary fiction, I think, and just heavy on theme and internal character exploration, and just really engaging to me. I read them now in 2018, so it's been a while, and maybe some of the details have been fading from memory. I want to do a reread, but just such a solid trilogy that's very thought-provoking and very high-stakes, intense. Alright, which brings me to number 1, and I did cheat here because it's not really a series, but that is The Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson. So if it was Cixin Liu that reinvigorated my reading habit in 2017 with Three Body Problem, it was Brandon Sanderson that brought me into the fold of adult fantasy in 2018. I read Mistborn and I felt like I was reading Harry Potter as a kid again. I was just so utterly lost in the story and engaged with these characters. I binged the first Mistborn trilogy, then the Elantris, Warbreaker, the first 3 Stormlight books, the first 3 Mistborn Era 2 books, the novellas. I was enraptured by all of these Cosmere books. And since I did them all together, maybe it does make sense to keep them, even though I do think the Mistborn trilogies are really separate series from Stormlight, let's say, and the standalones. But altogether, these have been my favorite fantasy of the last bunch of years. The way that Sanderson does his plotting, just so intricately plotted with amazing payoffs at the end of these books. Great payoffs on reread as well. Characters that I know don't work fantastically for everyone, but for me, it's so easy to care and get invested in their journeys. And more than any other books on this list, they have brought out emotion with me, gotten me so emotionally invested and bringing out some tears occasionally at the ends of some of these books. And so yeah, just utter investment with the way that the Cosmere is playing out. The Stormlight books are probably my single favorite series, but Mistborn itself was what brought me in, and I just love that fast-paced, intricately plotted series with incredibly interesting magic system, gritty, intense action scenes, characters I cared about all over the place. But Stormlight is his magnum opus, this giant sweeping epic that I am utterly gripped to. When people say, oh, they didn't like some parts of Oathbringer and Rhythm of War dragged for them, but no, for me, it's been all 5 stars across the board. Love it. Just inject the Cosmere into my veins, and I can't wait to read even more Cosmere books this year as he releases some standalones. So yeah, that is my current favorite, and that was my top 10 favorite series in science fiction and fantasy, historical fiction also. So hope you enjoyed seeing this snapshot of where I'm at in the genre. And yeah, tell me some of your favorites. Do you agree with me on any of these? Disagree? Love to hear your thoughts. And I'll catch you later.